afternoon. Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Susan Kelly, President of the City Club. Welcome to another special program, this time focusing on the state of the Port of Portland with Executive Director, City Club member Bill Wyatt. A few announcements. Next week on Friday, April 4th, join us for another in our State of series, and this time it will be Portland Mayor Vera Katz. She will be with us to share her perspective on the state of the city. This program is already filling up, so if you're interested in coming, please make your arrangements very, very soon. The club's annual membership drive is at 60% of our goal, and we're aiming for 100. So today, those of you who are guests, please think about joining City Club, and if you would like to ask a question today of our guest speaker, fill out your little form and hand it off to one of our staff members and you get to ask a question. On your tables, there is a yellow card. The research board is seeking a chair for the early childhood development study. This is going to be a very interesting long-term study, and we need someone not necessarily with expertise in the field, but the skills and ability to lead a committee and carry through all, as you know, the research process of studying, interviewing. It's going to be a very timely and important report, so please consider that if you are interested, and the yellow cards are there. Oregon Public Broadcasting is not able to broadcast this program repeat on their usual Tuesday schedule, Tuesday at 1:15. Instead, it is in the evening, so during this wartime, please tune in at 8 p.m. on Tuesday for the repeat of the program. Our board host today is Gwen Milius, member of the Board of Governors and a partner in the firm of Stevie and Milius LLP. She will ask the first question of our speaker, and as in every week following Gwen's question, we'll open the program to questions from City Club members only. Please line up behind the microphone before Gwen is finished so that we can move through as many questions as possible. It is a privilege of City Club members only, and it's a 30-second question, please. Broadcast of our programs this quarter is made possible by the corporate underwriting of Kaiser Permanente, Nike, and Washington Mutual. We are very grateful for their support. Our guest today is Bill Wyatt, Executive Director of the Port of Portland. He began working at the port about 18 months ago on October 1st, just weeks after our world changed forever. Bill is a native Oregonian and has been active in the state and region's political and business circles for the past 30 years. For 7 of those recent years, he served as Chief of Staff for Oregon Governor John Kitzhaber. And in that position, he helped oversee the operations of the state's agencies and divisions, comprised of 46,000 employees with an annual budget of over $11 billion. Prior to serving as Chief of Staff, Bill served as President of the Oregon Business Council and as Executive Director of the Association of Portland Progress. He represented Clatsop and Columbia counties as a member of the Oregon House of Representatives from 74 to 76. He must have been very young then. And he worked in government affairs for the Oregon State Employees Association in the city of Portland. Bill has been a board member of numerous nonprofit boards, including Oregon Public Broadcasting, and he has served as chair of the Urban League of Portland. The Port of Portland is the second oldest port on the West Coast and provides facilities and services to move cargo and people through its 5 main terminals and 4 airports. Although the Portland boundaries are limited to Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington counties, its impacts are felt throughout the Northwest in terms of supporting thousands of jobs and strengthening the region's economy. Please welcome Bill Wyatt.
Thank you very much, Susan, and thank you for this opportunity to address the City Club about the state of the port, the challenges that we face in the months and years ahead. And I suppose I need to take just a moment here and acknowledge a few folks in the audience who I recognize, not the least of which are my parents, Faye and Wendell Wyatt, who've come down to join me. I see three of my employers in the room here. My commission president, Jay Waldron, Bob Eaton from Astoria, Junkie Yoshida, who I just saw come in right over here, and it's always a pleasure to have them join these events as well. I want to recognize also two representatives here from Local 8 of the International Longshore and Warehousemen's Union, Bruce Holdy and Jeff Smith, and very glad to have you here. And I am particularly pleased to see not just one or two, but all of the members of the Port of Vancouver Commission here, who are sitting back with my commission president, Jay Waldron, and their executive director, Larry Paulson. And it's an honor for me to have you here, and I appreciate it very much. We've developed, I think, a very good and cooperative working relationship. And also from the Port of St. Helens, Peter Williamson, and his commission president, Colleen DeShazer, and thank you very much. And I suspect I probably missed a few here, and I'll try and make up for that at some later time. In politics as well as in comedy, timing is everything, and so apparently it is with port directors. At a going away party for my former boss, John Kitzhaber, I was introduced by the member of our staff in the following way. Please welcome Bill Wyatt, the only member of the staff to increase his income in a down economy and leave just in time to miss 5 special sessions. Now, of course, my view is a little different. In my 16 months as executive director of the Port of Portland, we've managed to shut down Portland International Airport for 4 days following 9/11. Our marine terminals were closed for nearly 10 days during the labor dispute between the longshoremen and the shipping companies. Bulk agricultural exports are off significantly. Airline travel has decreased to 1996 levels. U.S. Air, United Airlines, and Hawaiian Airlines are in bankruptcy, and it seems as though most of the rest of the domestic industry is preparing to join them. The economy remains in recession with no real recovery in sight, and our nation is at war. And if that weren't enough, this morning at about 10 o'clock, a member of the staff rushed into my office breathlessly to inform me that out at Terminal 6, our container facility, we'd had a modest little accident, and a container with about 102 loaded containers of formerly dried and compressed hay and formerly dried peas, lentils, and beans had overturned and are now sitting on the bottom of the Columbia River, awaiting distribution to markets as yet determined. And I should add, only through the quick action of the longshoremen sitting about 100 feet up in the air in this container crane was further disaster averted, which just goes to show you that these are very high-skill positions, not always without their challenges. Now, as I regularly remind my management team, opportunity abounds. The point of this little introduction is that no matter where you sit today, the challenges are huge. Challenges driven by a weak economy, changes in security, changes in technology, changes in global markets, and in our case, certainly, changes in regulation. It's no different for the Port of Portland, its constituents, or its far-flung customers. Today, I want to share with you the principal challenges we've identified in our recently adopted strategic plan, why they matter to the prosperity of our region, and why I'm not crazy for thinking our region has a bright future as an international sea and airport. I realize it's difficult at this time to imagine a bright future, because it's a lot easier to list the problems than it is to list the opportunities. But as a friend of mine is very fond of saying, there's really no survival value in pessimism. And while optimistic may be too strong a word to describe how I feel about the future of our region, at least at the moment, I think determined is a more accurate word. Determined to figure the best strategy out of our current situation, determined to market this great region to the rest of the world, and determined to build on the investments previous generations have made. Let me remind you a little bit about the port's history. We started in 1891, organized by the Oregon legislature as the authority charged with the responsibility of constructing and maintaining a shipping channel between Portland and the mouth of the Columbia River. We operate PDX and 3 other general aviation airports. We have 4 marine terminals dealing in everything from wheat to Hondas to sneakers. Every day, over 100,000 people get up and go to work because of the facilities owned and operated by the Port of Portland. We're the largest West Coast auto port and the 3rd largest in the country. We're the 2nd largest wheat export port in the U.S. and the largest exporter of mineral bulks in on the West Coast. 29 million short tons of 29 million short tons of cargo came and went on the Columbia River last year with a value of $14 billion. $3 billion in cargo flew out of here to important domestic markets as well as to Europe and Asia, and last year nearly 13 million people flew in and out of Portland. Our mission is simple: provide competitive cargo and passenger access to regional, national, and international markets while enhancing the region's quality of life. Accomplishing the mission is not so simple, in large part because our world has changed so much. In fact, every mode of transportation for which the port provides a venue, rail, truck, airline, and steamship, has been largely deregulated over the course of the last 20 years, and the effects of that are just now beginning to be felt. That's why we spent the last 6 months in a high-speed but thorough strategic planning effort, which resulted in the adoption of a new strategic plan just adopted 2 weeks ago by the Port of Portland Commission. We targeted 6 specific areas that are not intended to be comprehensive, but rather to identify the key issues that are our most significant challenges. And I want to go through a few of them today. I'm not going to deal with each of them, but I will mention them. First, long-term financial viability and sustainability, for obvious reasons. Competitive maritime access, international air service, sustained environmental performance, increased stakeholder involvement, and building trade-related infrastructure. In a desire to keep this speech well under 2 hours, I want to touch on just 3 of those topics today: environmental sustainability, competitive maritime access, and international air service. These 3 topics are tied together by one thread: dramatic change over the last 2 years. Change that has made environmental management more important and more complex, and change which has made the aviation and maritime industries intensely competitive. When I spoke here in November of 2001, I had just made the decision to elevate environmental policy to a department-level position at the port and create a Department of Environmental Affairs. That action has focused sometimes disparate programs and policies under one department and has helped our organization create and implement an environmental management system, a system driven by objectives and targets against which we can measure our success. For example, last year we set targets of reducing waste generation and hazardous material. We accomplished that. We removed all the mercury switches from our 330 vehicle fleet. We bought more than 700 new laptop and workstation computers and recycled all the packaging. We exceeded our target of purchasing more than 25% of our supplies from environmentally friendly suppliers. We set out to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and port employees have responded. Today, 6 out of 10 port employees working in the downtown office use alternative commute options. 24% of port vehicles use alternative fuels. We have purchased 600,000 kilowatt hours of salmon-friendly and clean wind energy, and we have reduced energy consumption at our facilities in the last year by 800,000 kilowatt hours. And we set out to minimize impacts to natural resources. With an international airport, business parks, and 4 marine terminals, that can be quite a challenge. But to date, we have done environmental restoration projects at Rivergate Industrial Park. We've done an award-winning mitigation project at Vanport, and we've incorporated riverbank restoration at the Toyota facility, which is being developed at Terminal 4 just north of the St. John's Bridge. I could go on, but these examples are just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. While they're important, our strategic plan realizes that the real environmental benefit will come from meeting our strategic objective, which is to integrate long-term environmental goals and port planning, project development, and decision-making. Real environmental improvement comes when our impacts on air, land, and water are integral considerations in our day-to-day, year-to-year business, and not just occasional one-time considerations. That's a strategy that lies at the heart of meeting our environmental strategic objective. Now, I'd like to tell you where we are with work to clean up the Superfund site in the lower Willamette Harbor. We continue to work with both the City of Portland and the other members of the lower Willamette group to complete the remedial investigation and feasibility study that will guide the actual cleanup work. We're moving as fast as nature and the EPA will allow, but this will take time, and it's got to be done right, because this is the work that will really guide the extent of the cleanup, where we clean up, and the methods that we use to clean up. When we do this work, we want it to be right. It's really that simple. The port has also taken the initiative to begin conversations with the EPA about what we call early actions. A cleanup of Terminal 4, which is on the east bank of the Willamette, just north of the St. John's Bridge, as I mentioned earlier. Early action is an expedited process undertaken between a responsible party, in this case the Port of Portland, and the EPA to try and accelerate remediation of well-known contaminated sites. We're hopeful we can reach an agreement on this by early summer and proceed at Terminal 4 to accomplish the cleanup of that site and ensure that it remains a viable terminal for international trade. This leads nicely to our next strategic objective, to serve the region's importers, exporters, and consumers by enhancing Portland's role as a major national gateway for bulk cargo and automobiles, and improving the port's niche as a regional container and general cargo port. To do this, we must compete against other Western ports for cargoes, such as imported autos and exported minerals, but most importantly, we must ensure that we provide the conditions under which carriers can make money moving the cargo we in this region produce. If we don't do that, ocean carriers, like airlines, will be left no other choice but to deploy their assets, their ships, in other places, leaving Oregon farms and businesses in the lurch. We have many strategies to accomplish them. Most of them, however, involve terms like intermodal container balance, transloading, and terminal overcapacity. So because I don't want to see too many of you screaming for the doors, let me just touch on one very important topic, and that is deepening the Columbia River channel to 43 feet. Now, when I was here in November of 2001, I also spoke about the Columbia River deepening project. Since then, we've made considerable progress. And have moved a great deal towards final approval, and it's conceivable that we will begin work on this project before the end of this calendar year. Also, since then, nothing has changed in the economics of ocean-going freight to reverse the trend of larger ships carrying larger loads. This was a story that I had the chance to watch unfold right outside of my office window for the first 2 weeks of March. As the brand new grain hauling vessel, the Efrosini, filled with Northwest-grown, soft, white wheat. The Portland Tribune's Jeannie Sr. told this story in their March 14th edition, but it really bears repeating here. bound for Egypt from Portland on its maiden voyage. It took on 58,500 metric tons of wheat, or about 20 barges full. But it left with less than a full load. In fact, 5,400 tons less, because we have a 40-foot channel instead of a 43-foot channel. That increased the cost per ton to charter that ship from $19.50 to $21.43, or an extra $2 a ton. Now, in an industry with razor-thin margins, that cost eventually catches up with you. Repeat that same story hundreds of times over in a year, and you can see the cost we're paying as a region by not being able to take advantage of the full economy of scale of today's ocean vessels. That means higher shipping rates for grain, for bulk minerals, for containerized export cargo such as alfalfa, onions, hazelnuts, and French fries. It means a slow but steady loss of competitiveness for those exports, and a slow but steady loss in the competitiveness of Portland as an area from which to ship. It translates to less business, and finally to fewer jobs in our city, our region, and our state. This is why the Port of Portland and 5 other ports, many of them represented here, have pursued this project so doggedly over the last 15 years. The Army Corps of Engineers has recently updated their cost-benefit analysis based on changes in the project, and based on this study, it demonstrates that for every dollar spent, $1.71 of benefit will result. This has been subjected to independent analysis, and that analysis has borne out the conclusion. The project has been given the Good Housekeeping seal of approval by the National Marine Fisheries Service and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and poses no jeopardy to threatened or endangered species. All 6 sponsoring ports, 2 in Oregon, 4 in Washington, are in the final stage of negotiating a project cooperation agreement with the Corps of Engineers. And recently, Congress made its second appropriation to the project, granting $2 million for construction in this year. We're in the final stages of review on water quality and coastal zone management permits from both Oregon and Washington. Now, like I said, the channel isn't the only strategy to remain a competitive port. We must continue to find niche containerized cargoes to come into Portland. In fact, we're making progress with a new service that would go from South America to Portland to Asia and then back to South America. If everything goes as planned, this new service would make its first call in mid-May, bringing containerized imports up the west coast of South and Central America directly into Portland on a fortnightly basis. The ships would load up with our regional exports and head west to Asian Pacific Rim countries like Korea, China, and Taiwan. Imports would include things like coffee, wine, radiata pine lumber, and exports would include things like French fries, animal feed, grass seed, and paper products. We will be this carrier's only North American port of call, and by going to Asia first rather than returning to South America, it gives our local exporters more local cargo capacity for that most important Asian market of ours. By the way, if this new service comes to Portland, it'll be because of the exceptional research, legwork, and inventiveness of port staff, which carefully identified the cargo flows and trends, and then found and attracted a service to match. Because today's global economy links the important job and wealth-creating functions of production and manufacturing so closely with distribution and warehousing, we must find ways to encourage distribution and warehousing in our region. This will provide an incentive for companies to import and export through our port and help assure us that our international cargo connections remain available and competitive. We will be working with the Governor's Task Force on industrial land supply to be certain that distribution and warehousing are given full and thoughtful consideration. We must continue to invest in both road and rail infrastructure to keep cargo moving, as we hope to do with money from this year's federal transportation reauthorization. But all these strategies are more likely to succeed with a deeper channel, a channel that ensures we keep core businesses of grains, mineral bulks, automobiles, and containers in sound financial shape, and allows us to compete successfully for the all-important service provided by ocean carriers. Let me just close by sharing with you our strategy on international air service. We've adopted what I like to call the one service per tectonic plate strategy. One airline with nonstop service to Europe, one airline with nonstop service to Mexico, and hopefully one airline with nonstop service to Asia. But our goal is more than just getting the service, it's also keeping the service. Again, the intense competitive nature of the air travel industry today, coupled with our relatively small passenger base, means we will not, like Seattle or Vancouver, BC, have 2 or 3 nonstop services to each of those markets. The airlines simply wouldn't make money. Our market in each of these areas is really only large enough to support one nonstop service. And frankly, if we can't build a strong and sound business case to support that service, it's not in our interest to attract a service that is only likely to fail. This is exactly the case we made to Lufthansa, whose first flight arrives in 3 days. We looked at the market, we did the math, went to Frankfurt, and made the case. And when I say we, I mean our business community, our political community, our tourism industry, all of whom were instrumental in making this case. I also mean an extraordinarily talented and capable port staff which put the business case together and then developed and executed a thoughtful and ultimately successful campaign to attract Lufthansa. Our goal now is to help them succeed here in this region. We will be working with them to help market their service here and in Europe, and we're advocating, along with the tourism industry, funding for increased tourism marketing in Europe. And while this certainly helps Lufthansa be successful, most importantly, it helps Oregon succeed by taking full advantage of the tourism potential of this service. This same coalition has also helped us make a winning case to Mexicana Airlines. The new service starting May 1 will be an important tie to Guadalajara, our sister city, and a major business center in Mexico, to Mexico City, and to Morelia, the capital of Michoacan and home region to many of the Mexican nationals and immigrants who live in Oregon and Washington. Again, we will be working closely with Mexicana to make their business a success and leverage it to the maximum advantage of our city, state, and region. This leaves our region with the most difficult of these 3 markets to crack, and that's Asia. It'll be a tough job, but it's very much worth the effort. Asia is still our #1 trading partner, with 2001 exports totaling nearly $8.2 billion in Oregon alone. And as of 1999, there were nearly 800 Oregon and Southwest Washington companies trading with Asia. These companies employed more than 125,000 people locally. Both of these numbers, of course, would be a bit smaller today, but nevertheless very, very significant. So let me just briefly describe what our strategy is. First, a caution. This will take time. Our target is the 2004-2005 timeframe. We are only in the first mile of this marathon, but we're moving ahead, and we do have a strategy. The first part of that is to make Portland a spoke to an Asian hub, such as Narita Airport. Now, this is a bit different from the Delta experience, where Portland was actually Delta's hub through which passengers from across the U.S. flew to Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. Only a small number of the passengers on that service actually originated in Portland. Most came from Delta's other hubs. Delta established this system based on the regulatory environment and plane technology of the day. But that changed. Now, better engine technology and changed bilateral air agreements between Japan and the U.S. allow passengers from larger markets to fly directly to Japan and to other places in Asia, instead of having to use the West Coast, in our case Portland, as a gateway. That means we've got to make a business case based on our passenger base here in this region. That's challenging, but it's really the only way we have to go. Second, we're hoping to leverage the Star Alliance, of which Lufthansa, Mexicana, United, and many others are members. Increasingly, alliances which allow customers to move frequent flyer miles and other incentives between carriers, and carriers to centralize their planning for routes and deployment of planes are in vogue. Currently, we're planning a trip to Asia in mid-May to speak with Asian carriers in Japan and perhaps in Korea. Finally, we'll work with our civic and business community in the region, including Southwest Washington and around the state, to express the same level of interest that our travel bank partners expressed to Lufthansa. Again, I have to stress that we're in the first mile of this marathon, and it will take determination, endurance, and a little bit of luck to get us there. But I view this goal as within our grasp. We have the passengers, we have the commitment, we have a great airport and a business community and a political community which is very committed to make this work. I don't want to underestimate this challenge or others. Our economy is still weak as I speak. We're at war. Our resources are stretched thin by urgent needs to maintain a secure airport and marine port. The economies of our trading partners are also weak. It is indeed not difficult to survey the landscape and be reminded of the old joke, "Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?" From the perspective of the Port of Portland, we see those challenges and live with them every day. But we're also reminded that the world marches on. We will continue to import cars and export grains. We'll start new air service to Europe, to Mexico, and hopefully by 2005 to Asia. And we'll learn to operate sustainably with a smaller footprint on our region's environment. We'll weather these tough times, and when they abate, as they most certainly will, our port, our region, and our state will be poised to prosper. That's the mission we take to work every day, and I look forward to your support in meeting it. Thank you.
Guinevere Milius, City Club member. I have a question about a topic that you did not address in your speech. Since September 11th, the focus in America for security of ports has been on our airports, but little of the public's focus has been turned on shipping ports. What has the federal government asked ocean-going ports to do in terms of security, and are there requests being funded? And then the second part of my question is, do you think security and how individual ports address it will affect their competitiveness in the future?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. I particularly like the part about the funding. You know, I'm looking at my colleagues out here, and we're all waiting for the check to arrive. Well, you know, we're in a unique position in a couple of respects. Number one, most of the marine port security concerns really revolve or have typically revolved around containerized business. We're the only container port on the Columbia River, and we're a relatively small one insofar as the West Coast is concerned. The other thing that makes us unique is that we're really only one of 5 major consolidated ports in the United States. Seattle, Portland, Oakland, New York, New Jersey, and Massport both operate major international airports and seaports. So I get a chance to see how it works on both sides. And there's a really significant difference, and that is in the world of aviation, we have essentially a national system of aviation growing increasingly international, and airports. And people ask me all the time, gee, how are you paying for all this out at the airport? And it's really a pretty simple formula. If you fly, you pay. Seaports are quite different because we don't really have a national system that is anything like that which exists in the world of aviation. We compete with one another. We try to the greatest extent possible to cooperate with our colleagues across the river and down the river, but the reality is every once in a while there is competition. We certainly compete with other ports up and down the West Coast, so anything which places a specific burden on an individual port obviously puts them to some extent or another at a competitive disadvantage. And so those of us in the port industry have advocated for a national response to this challenge so that no one is placed at a competitive disadvantage. We, like the airport, have done a number of things at our container facility out at Terminal 6, some of which I would just as soon not talk about, but we're working very closely with the captain of the port, who is also the local Coast Guard commander and who has overall responsibility locally for seaport safety. For those who focus all of their attention on containers, though, I would simply say that I think there are 51 marine terminals on the lower Columbia River, about 10 of which are in public hands. And the rest of them are in private hands, and they contain everything from fuel oils to anhydrous ammonia to you name it, the basic building blocks of an industrial society. And I think I can safely say most of them were probably not constructed 30 and 40 and 50 years ago with anything like what we're experiencing today in mind. And so slowly but surely, those facilities are also being subjected to these same increased standards of security. The marine world is further behind the aviation world, I would say. That's my observation, but catching up. My sense about the ultimate response to the challenge of containers coming into this challenge is this. If we're attempting to catch cargoes by the time they land on our shores, we're too late. Because if you have been to Seattle and seen where their container facilities are, or to San Pedro Bay down in LA and Long Beach, you know that they are, or for that matter Oakland, you know that they are in the heart of those regions and those communities. And so the approach of the commercial and the security apparatus of the country and of the industry has been to, as they say, push the borders back and gain a clearer and better and more secure understanding about what's going into those containers at the port of embarkation. And there is slow but steady progress. One anecdote, the Customs Service, and I can't even remember what their new name is within the Department of Homeland Security, adopted a rule some time ago that requires a 24-hour manifest to be filed in advance of sailing, on the theory that, okay, we'll know what's on board before the ship even leaves its home port. Well, this was to include all cargoes, and we happen to be over with our friends at Toyota in Nagoya celebrating having signed a new 15-year lease, and they were very concerned about this requirement, and here's why, and I think it just really reflects on what a change all of us are experiencing. Because 24 hours in advance of the sailing of a car ship, most of the cars haven't even yet been manufactured. So that presents a bit of a challenge. And I think it is a metaphor for how the world of global transportation has changed. And I think it's a very significant little vignette to remember when you think about this challenge that we confront. And to the final point about the money, no, they're not giving us enough, and they need to give us more. Yeah, right.
Hello, Bill. Bill Parrish, City Club member. If I miraculously was on the court playing with the Trailblazers, I'd have a great time, and I'd probably keep playing until someone said, Bill, it's just not a match. And my question, using that example, is one of the biggest problems in Oregon's history was NERCO. It was a huge debacle. It so weakened Pacific Core that some people believe that's why Pacific Core is now owned by Scottish Power. My question specifically is head of the Port of Portland with a lot of great employees who are all in PERS, the Public Employment Retirement System, Why has there been so much scrutiny with respect to the PERS board and no dialogue related to Oregon Investment Council, who NERCO's CEO, former CEO Gerald Drummond, is chair of? Do you believe it would be appropriate to generate some dialogue on that?
One more time on this?
I'm sorry, that was a very complicated question, but I guess we talk about all these relationships. Are you on the right team? There are $40 billion in public pension assets being supervised by the Oregon Investment Council. Those are really big decisions they're making that impact us all. And Gerard Drummond, the question is should he be on that team, basically, as chair?
Oh, sure. Yeah, he's been a member of the Investment Council on 2 different occasions. On one occasion, they made a lot of money. This last time, they lost a little money. And I don't think that has as much to do with the investment decisions as it does the time. I don't know a lot of people who made money in the stock market over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, but as far as I'm concerned, he's done a fine job. I don't know anything to the contrary. Joe.
Hi, Bill. Joe Smith, City Club. I want to ask a question about relating particularly to air cargo, but also to passenger travel. As you know, the Seattle airport is planning a new runway, and if they're lucky, planes will be landing on it in 10 years. They are already suffering restrictions on cargo capacity for cargo aircraft. Would you comment on what opportunities you see this for Portland, what opportunity particularly for Portland, not just to compete with Seattle, but to support the Northwest, and what, if any, limitations you see or handicaps you see with which we need to be dealing to address the opportunity?
Okay, good question. We have 3 international air cargo services at Portland. Soon, I guess we'll have 4 with the addition of Lufthansa, because they'll take a little over every day, and Mexicana, I assume, will do the same, and our new Asian carrier will want to do the same as well. But the freighters, which is cargo only, are Cargolux to Europe, Korean Airlines 3 times a week to Incheon, and now Air China Cargo to Beijing and to Shanghai. Just once again, to place this in context, these are 747s. They're big planes. They can carry a little over 100 tons of cargo. We don't have currently in this region the volumes that would warrant one of these freighters filling up exclusively here. So we have essentially a top-off strategy that we have marketed to these carriers. And if you think of Air China as an example, who do they serve in the United States? Where do they go? They go to San Francisco, they go to Los Angeles, they go to Chicago, they go to Portland. And so we're in a pretty good league there. And the reason they come to Portland is that they stop in Los Angeles first and take on 60 or 70,000 pounds, and then they come to Portland and top off with air soles or whatever else may be next. So the step from there to actually attracting a full-sized freighter and bearing the responsibility here in this region to filling it up 2 or 3 times a week, which are the kind of the minimum frequencies that you really need to make a service like that work, is a big one. And it means that the freight community, if you will, would have to truck freight here. Now, this may seem strange, but air cargo is valuable enough so that people are willing to truck the cargo great distances. We have people who produce here in Portland and who every week truck their products down to Los Angeles to be air freighted to various parts of the world. It's that valuable. It's that important to make it move quickly. And so our capture area, if you want to think about it like that, is bigger than would be the case for passengers. And the case that Joe makes about Seattle is an interesting one. They have 2 runways, but unlike ours, they are so close together that there is never a time when they'll be able to use them simultaneously, or at least never a time in our lifetime, that they'll be able to use them together. So their capacity is very limited. They're in the process of attempting to permit a new runway. This is a $2 billion proposition to construct an 11,000-foot modern runway. It's very, very expensive, and you can take your bet about whether the airline industry is in a position to finance that, because that's really where it comes from. And so I think the answer to your question, Joe, is that we do have some opportunities there, but we have challenges as well, because Seattle does have daily nonstop service, passenger service, that also collects cargo. And so we're competing in a market that is probably balanced out just about right today. The question is, when the economy really starts to take off, will the growth in cargo create opportunities for us? And I think the answer is yes. We've been very successful with the services that we've established here to Europe and to Asia. We'd like to get back into Japan, where we don't have service today. And the key is having enough frequency, having the service sufficiently available so that the freight forwarders and the shippers and the producers can count on having the service. And once they have that, then they'll use it. So there's a bit of a gap there that we're probably going to have to figure out how to bridge. But I do think there are opportunities there.
John Leeper, City Club member.
Yes, sir.
Good presentation, sir.
Thank you.
However, I think there's one subject, at least near and dear to my heart, you left out. Aircraft noise and quality of life. Would you be amenable to increasing Washington County's representation on CNAC and also looking more carefully at anything in the way of redevelopment plans at Hillsborough Airport with increased citizen involvement participation?
I think, let me just divide this into two parts, airport noise. Now, this is a subject I hear about from time to time. I live in Northeast Portland, and so I'm subject to the effects of living near an international airport. And this is, I think, one of the most compelling public policy subjects that one can imagine, because on the one hand, airports produce large volumes of sound, and that's the way it is. And at some level, that's not really going to change. Sound can be measured, and we do a lot of that. All airports do. Noise, on the other hand, is one's interpretation of sound. And some people are more affected by it than others. And I have personal experience with this, because I have neighbors who didn't even think about the fact that we live close to the airport until I got this job, and I have other neighbors who were delighted to know that I had this job so that they could continue to impress upon me their concerns related to noise generated by activities at our airport. And I think the gentleman makes a very important point for people to remember. PDX is not the only airport in this region. The second busiest airport in Oregon is Hillsborough. And Intel operates a kind of a mini airline of its own out of that airport, and that's not really where the noise is generated. There's a helicopter training facility there, which tends to generate a fair amount of noise. We have a strategy for managing this issue that really kind of goes like this. First of all, you have to pay constant attention to this subject. The number of flight operations at Portland International Airport, at Hillsborough, to a slightly lesser extent at Troutdale, and to a much lesser extent at Malino, are mind-boggling. We have the capability of producing maps that will show you the flight tracks that occur on a daily basis. And I got one from my house. I just wanted to see what it looked like. And of course, I couldn't see the map from underneath the colored flight tracks. And so there is an enormous volume of activity. We get a lot of calls from people who are affected by that. And so we're able to take that person's call and complaint and then track it back to the actual occurrence and determine whether or not something was happening that shouldn't have been happening. Now, let me also, and then respond to that person, and I think our record for responding in those circumstances is quite good. We've just hired a brand new noise manager who, I might add, happens to live in Vancouver, Washington, which I'm delighted about because that is also a source of many of the complaints that we receive about airport noise, so she'll be able to respond more directly to those challenges. We also have created the means by which citizens can interact directly with us. One of these, CNAC, is the Citizens Noise Advisory Committee. We're also engaged in what's called a Part 150 study, which is an enormous and expensive process to assess any change in noise levels or activities, in this case at PDX, and then frankly to look at adjusting flight patterns in and out of the airport to adjust to the contours associated with the creation of that noise. Now, with specific reference to Washington County's representation on CNAC, I think I would be happy to revisit the subject of Washington County's representation on CNAC. I couldn't tell you today what the precise commitments have been about membership. There is no reason why we shouldn't relook at that. I think it would be very appropriate. But I also think it's important for people to understand one essential fact, and that is every square centimeter of airspace in the United States is characterized and classified by the Federal Aviation Administration. And once a plane leaves the ground, they come into the jurisdiction and under the jurisdiction of the Federal Aviation Administration. We're not in a position to tell people where they can fly and where they can't fly. And the fact that we have an airport and we're part of a national system means that we have to respond as well within that context. Noise is not part of our strategic plan because, as I said, these were the sort of the four forward-looking issues, or the six forward-looking issues that we thought deserved the most attention. But I will say this: we live with this subject every single day because we have to, because it's such an important part of what we do. So I'm happy to revisit the subject of CNAC and Washington County's representation. As you may know, we're in the process of redoing the master plan for Hillsborough. I think that the citizen participation there has been very strong. And we certainly want to encourage as much of that as we possibly can. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Susan. What happened? I'm Susan Pierce, member, and I have two-part questions. First of all, that I was directed, please. First of all, my dog Emily, who has a lot of lab in her and is an excellent swimmer, is not allowed to swim in the lower Willamette for obvious reasons. And I know that you've addressed part of that, but she'd really like to know if ever she will be in her lifetime able to. And also, how much realistically of paying for that is coming out of her kibble and toy fund as opposed to that of the people who actually contaminated, who are responsible for the contamination. That's one. And the other is that the people in my hometown on the Clearwater River east of Lewiston are concerned about shipping products from north central Idaho, but they're also sportsmen who are concerned about the salmon. And I didn't hear you really address the issue of salmon and what the Port of Portland is doing to protect salmon and perhaps allow us to go back to our earlier salmon runs. And how do you balance the two issues?
Lower Willamette, what's your dog's name? Emily. Okay. Well, are we talking about Emily's lifetime or our lifetime here? That might help with that. Well, this has been an interesting subject for me because when I talked earlier about early action, I don't want to confuse anybody into thinking that that means soon, okay? This is an enormously complex undertaking. There are probably 100 PRPs, people, responsible parties, in the lower Willamette. Some more responsible than others, some larger than others. We happen to be a significant one. I'm not going to get into how significant because therein lies the rest of the story, and that is everybody has an interest to protect, and in some cases we have your interest to protect because you own us, and we don't want to expose ourselves to any more liability than is appropriate or prudent. I would say this, I had the chance to view this project from my perspective in the governor's office, where I had a different hat on, and now I have a chance to look through the other end of the telescope. I think that we're much further along with this project, having said what I said earlier about speed and the relative dearth thereof. The fact is that the major parties, the major public and private parties, have signed an administrative order on consent voluntarily. No one put the gun to their head. And that puts us much further ahead than many other comparable sites around the country. I think there is a greater commitment to cleaning this site up than exists in many other places, and that's a good thing because commitment is required. This is a long-term project, and so I remember when I started, I got my initial briefing. It was fun to go on the other side of the wall and see, okay, well, I wish I'd have known that a little earlier, you know. And the dates all seem to me to be, way out there. And all of a sudden they're getting a little closer, which I think is an encouraging sign. I've been here a little longer, so I can see that. And I think the most important thing about speed is this: it's going to happen incrementally, and so the quality of the environment will improve not all at once, but over a long period of time, and in some cases over a short period of time. Our Terminal 4 is a major problem area, and if we're able to move ahead quickly, that'll make a significant difference. The city is a complex party in all of this because they are, on the one hand, responsible for the 26 outfalls within the Superfund area. It's part of the combined sewer overflow and has made a contribution. And on the other hand, they are, as far as I know, uninsured. And so that means that ratepayers, people who are hooked up to the city sewer and water system, will essentially be bearing their share of this cost. And what's more, the EPA is unlikely to sign off on any cleanup activity until those issues are resolved, because it is a continuing source of pollution. And so the thing the EPA wants to do is make sure they have cut off all continuing sources first and then do cleanup. And so there's a timing that is associated with the combined sewer overflow. As to who pays, it really works like this. Superfund law is fairly established, and some folks have insurance. We have some. I hope we can collect. The city has sewer and water fees. Private companies also hope they have insurance bills. I have no other source of income to go to. I think it's a well-known fact that we're unable to generate enough revenue from our operating activities to cover our expenses and also make significant new capital investments, infrastructure investments, and do this kind of remedial investigation. So we've got a fleet of very well-qualified lawyers, and I've got a floor full of people who are looking for insurance policies hither and yon, and we're doing what we can to make sure that we have the resources to do that. The law of the Superfund basically is polluters pay. And there have been various attempts to get around that. And for those sources of pollution which cannot be specifically identified with any individual party, the basic rule of thumb is figure out what the cost is and divide it among those who remain standing. And so I don't think there is likely to be a big public cost beyond the city as a responsible party.
We only have 1 minute for the second of Susan's questions.
Which was?
On the Lewis River, the fish.
Oh,
salmon.
yeah. Well, 1 minute probably isn't going to do it. Lewiston is an interesting town. They're the source of the largest producer of container volumes in the Upper River area, Potlatch, which produces a particular unique kind of paper product that comes down on barge and ships out of here to Japan and to China. About 5,000 boxes a year come this way. And I would say there is a paper machine in that facility which is probably dependent upon this service existing, because I don't think they could afford over a long period of time to truck them or rail them to other ports. So the container on barge system is vital for that. The salmon issue, Snake River dams, main stem dams, is obviously of critical importance to us, because we can't survive without an environment which our larger world, our larger community is prepared to support and to endorse. Now, I will say I have been encouraged by the most recent developments and signs related to the health of various of these runs, and candidly also say that it's certainly discouraging that there are not more native runs from places like the Clearwater, which is greatly affected. But the last time I was in Lewiston, I was thrilled to see a joint project between Potlatch and the Nez Perce. And it was essentially a hatchery and production facility that they produced that is now beginning to produce real results. And so our hope and our goal is that your friends will be able to, enjoy the fish. We see signs of improvement, and also enjoy the jobs from the paper line, which exists because we have this container on barge system that provides access to international markets.
Thank you. We're out of time. I'm still hung up on a freight boat that can have all the cars made in 24 hours. It's just, City Club is adjourned. Thank you, Bill Wyatt.